Thomas at Creative Mornings is that we actually have a musician here to kick us off with a live song to kind of set the mood and fit the theme of our program. Mikey, your microphone's off, but why don't you turn on your mic, and then since I'm not sure if I have the right description that you want said about yourself, so why don't you do that yourself?
I'll describe myself? I'm terrified of doing that.
Well, okay, so Mikey was a musician that Mark Minlin, who's here from Mark Photo, put me in touch with, and I guess you teach at the School of Rock, and you're in a band.
Yeah, I have a band. We're called Apostle Jones. I saw someone mention Waterloo. We just played Bright Winter, a bunch of the festivals around Cleveland here. Just put out a live album that we did right before quarantine happened. So yeah, I'm just kind of over here, sitting here, trying to figure out my processes for life a little bit. But it's great to be here. Thank you.
So I really appreciate you hanging out with us, and I'd like to see how I'm looking very forward to your song.
Okay. Well, it was a good suggestion, so thank you. And actually, the more I'm kind of doing a little breakout session too, the meaning behind the song sort of resonated a little bit more. So I see what you were thinking, Spike. I see it, man.
You're going to hear a little bit more about what I'm thinking after you're done.
All right. Let me just test the piano and voice level real quick. So give me a okay if it's okay. Hear that okay?
I can. Even when you can't hear, like shake or nod or whatever, I can.
Cool. I saw a few nods, but we all agree nothing better than the real thing. But yeah, grateful to be here. Thank you. This is David Bowie's Changes. I still don't know what I was waiting for, and my time was running wild, a million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I've got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. And so I turned myself to face, but I never caught the glimpse, and how the others must see the faker. I'm much too fast to take their test. Changes, turn and face the strange. Changes, don't wanna be a richer man. Changes, turn and face the strange. Changes, oh, it's gonna have to be a different man. And time may change me, but I can't trace time. I watch the ripples change their size, but never leave the stream of warm impermanence. So these days they flow through my eyes, but still the days they seem the same. And these children, oh, their youth spit on, and how they try to change their worlds are immune to your consultations, oh Lord, yes. They're quite aware of what they're going through. Strange fascination, fascinating me. Changes are taking the pace I'm going through. Changes, turn and face the strange. Changes, look out you old rock and roller on. And time may change me, but I can't trace time. Time may change me, but I can't trace time. There it is.
Thank you. That was great. I saw a lot of smiles, and Christine was dancing pretty good. So thank you very much, Mikey. That was excellent.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I hope you'll stick around for the program, or we'll be doing breakout rooms at the end for people that want to talk, but that's up to you. But if you want to hear, I actually have something I want to say. So I don't normally I just don't stand in formality and I go right to the program, but I kind of wanted to say, say something about the topic for tonight. So I have prepared something that I took some time to write and share with everyone. So thank you for Mikey. We really appreciate that. So I want to say we're getting close to what you've been patiently waiting for. I normally go right to the program, but as we face this strange time, I'm motivated to explain my intent for the topic of as evolving as artists. So please indulge me for a few minutes. I actually sing changes in my head when I'm having a conversation with an artist that's resisting change. It could be something like they need a different computer, a software subscription, or any number of painful changes. I actually have done that before, and as a last-ditch effort, I've actually been known to sing the chorus out loud. Usually that just results in painful and confused expressions, so it doesn't really work, but I do it anyways because Changes is also kind of a protest song. So that's my kind of protest. Changes is also an amazing song because it's from Bowie's first album, and it kind of predicted the career of an artist who reinvented himself many times. Bowie evolved from Ziggy Stardust to Major Tom, to a pop star, to a painter, to a movie star, and a fashion icon. And he had many musical styles along the way. He was sometimes way ahead of his audience, and they would catch up eventually. He was even early to streaming music, and he was savvy in business, where he was the first musician to securitize his back catalog. So I think we as artists can learn from David Bowie as an example. Now, each of us have seen changes in the arts since whenever we jumped into the art stream. Those of you that are as seasoned as I am will remember the 80s with dedicated typesetting, specialized artist studios, and paste up. Those graphic means evolved into desktop publishing with PageMaker, Max, and even the Apple LaserWriter. That's when the art started fascinating me, and that's when CDPUG was created. And we've also seen the iron age of the printing press give way to the online world of web design, social media, inbound marketing, mobile devices, social media. I think I said that already. And a shrinking world and shrinking attention spans. Change is already here, but growing will be augmented reality, virtual reality, and if Bill Cohen Corrali gets his wish, 3D might finally become mainstream. Our most recent change is figuring out how to create and enjoy art in this period of shelter in place, remote meetings, social distancing, and where masking isn't something you do mostly in Photoshop. The German painter Gerhard Richter has expressed that art is the highest form of hope. I agree, and hope that we can use our art to heal the world. The world will always need healing, but as we turn and face the strange healing is literally in a totally unexpected way right now. I also believe that art can heal the self and that CDPUG can support artists in that process. That is why I do what I do for Team Spike, and that is what I do when I'm doing the programming for CDPUG. So please come back next month for the May showcase, and please contact me to get on the list to tell us your story. I hope that tonight's panel discussion will motivate each of you to evolve your art in whatever way your muse might take you. And let me finally introduce you to our panel of evolving artists and healers. So let's go ahead and get started. So our panel for tonight is going to be short one person. Lisa Griffiths has a serious illness in the family and will not be able to join us tonight. So the current panelists get to talk a lot more. I'm sure they'll be happy about that. So I'd like to at least let me go to the right page here. And I'm just going to do a brief introduction of the evolution of the artist. Lisa Griffiths, who can't be here, is a former photo editor and now the owner of a new business, Rescue Your Photos. I'll try to talk about her and represent a few things she's doing during the evening. And she was reluctant to do a whole evening, which is what I wanted her to do. So now maybe I can pressure her to do that. Lisa Gruber-Gebby, I can't see you, Lisa, right now. It's covered, but go ahead and wave. Former graphic designer and now a web designer for over 10 years and business owner of OrangeWall Creative. Karen Jewell-Kett, retired graphic designer and now a studio painter, instructor, and owner of First Hand Studio. And then you should wave to Karen. And then Sue Nelson, owner of the Job Search Center. So let's go in order. So Lisa Gruber-Gebby, why don't you give us an introduction to yourself? All right, let me unmute your mic for you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Hi, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Lisa Gruber-Gebby. I am creative director and principal of OrangeWall Creative, but the name doesn't mean anything because I keep changing my life. It was Gruber Design for 20 years. I am involved as a business owner with web development, corporate identity, brand design, and integration with all of the media to kind of help my client really promote their business. So I love what I do. And it's funny that Spike would ask me to work on this panel because there's just been a lot of changes, technology and vision, and you're right, just how global our world is now. So it's a pleasure to be here.
I've always, the reason I invited Lisa is I've admired that she got into, she was a print designer from CIA that adopted the web early. She was sort of a visionary about that. And I think, made the effort to make the change. And I respect that. So let's see, Karen, why don't you go next?
Hi, everybody. Spike, did you want me to share my screen?
Why don't you do the, if you want, I guess if you want to, does what you're showing fit into with your biography and what you want to tell people about yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, so go ahead and do that.
Okay. I don't know. Can you see that?
No.
Nope. Okay, never mind then. It didn't work.
Try it one more time, because you should be able to since you're a co-host.
How about that?
Okay. Yep, that worked.
Okay. Okay, so I was a graphic designer and manager at Cleveland State University for 35 years. I did print design mostly, a little bit of web design. And I retired in 2012, and seems like forever ago. And now I've got my own studio in the Screw Factory in Lakewood, and I do painting now. It was a very strange transition. It wasn't what I expected. So when you were singing about changes, it's true. You can change. So I'm excited to talk about how I made that transition.
All right. Thank you, Karen. All right, Sue, you're next. Oh, your microphone. Let me turn your microphone on for you.
Got it.
Okay, go ahead.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, I'm so delighted to be here with you all. Artists are like my favorite people in the world. Although I have to tell you, Mikey, musicians are like such a close second, you wouldn't believe it. So I'm really pleased. I have certainly been a career changer myself. I actually was 40 when I got my undergrad degree. and started into outplacement and career advising, and then ended up doing strategic planning and performance improvement and HR consulting. And then a couple of years ago, I was like, my real love is the whole job search and midlife people. And so that's what I'm doing. I founded the Job Search Center. And so now I am an entrepreneur as well as a job search coach.
Okay, and then Lisa Griffiths, we were going to have a problem with all the Lisa G's. She actually was a photojournalist. She worked at the Plain Dealer, and she started a business called Rescue Your Photos. And she's basically going to be helping people organize their digital photos and then all the actual print photographs that they have laying around the house in big boxes. And her website looks beautiful. And she was actually, when I saw what she was doing and how she's redirecting her graphic design into a specialty, she actually went and got training in whatever the credentials are for organizing photos. That's kind of helped me put the idea together for the program. I really wanted to have a variety of artists, and I thought Sue Nelson would be a great fit as a career advisor. So I guess let's start with Karen. Tell us about your transition and like what happened that you, how it went, like what went the way you expected and what went what was different.
Well, I kind of hadn't quite planned on retiring as early as I did, but the way things worked out, I did, even though I had been at Cleveland State for 35 years. I still felt like I was a graphic designer to the heart, to the core, I guess. So when I retired, I thought for sure I would do freelance work. And then I realized that I just wasn't interested. It was like I've had this really weird feeling of like, been there, done that. It's like, how many more brochures can I do? I was passionate about graphic design. And I kind of had a hobby. I always had kind of a side gig going with trying to do little paintings. I usually had a small studio space that I rented that I did paintings. And so I turned to that and realized that that was what was grabbing my interest. So I felt like I want to really start pursuing this and see where it takes me. So in the last 8 years, it's really quite developed. It's been a bigger learning curve than I expected to make the transition, even though it's still being an artist. It's a whole different thing. One of the worst things I'd have to tell you that happened to me was I would have these paintings, and at the focal point of the painting would be a large empty space. And I was like, well, what the heck? What's wrong? Why? I know how to lead the eye around a design because that's what I spent my whole life doing. But why were my paintings having an empty space and where the focal point would be? I couldn't understand it. And I realized that's where the type goes. That's where the type goes. So it's like that was one of the changes I had to make, was I just had to reprogram my brain to like, okay, I'm not dealing with type anymore and images. It's a different kind of a mindset. So that's an example of one of the changes I had to make.
Okay, how about for you, Lisa?
Oh, it's a long story. So I'm glad you guys are sitting down. So I went to school at CIA and I studied typography, design, as well as illustration. But I love psychology, so I did my thesis on the brain, and I was able to get a real brain and really just study it. I've always liked science and medicine. My first job was working for a college of medicine, a podiatrist, and pulling the cadavers down and drawing, and before medical illustration was really a thing. But just a love of being able to write and communicate. So moving forward, I realized that I was from the medical field transitioning over to going into more of an advertising or editorial. And that's where it split. And I actually worked for Penton Media. And that was great because I love to write, and working with a lot of different writers, and then putting image and being able to work on pretty custom projects was kind of a good transition. And then from there, I left because I knew that publishing wasn't going to be around a lot. And then did some freelance, met a lot of different people, realized, okay, print is kind of going away, even though I love design and the smell of print and paper. I'm like, you know what? I have to just, when you reinvent yourself, you realize you have to take everything and take it off the desk and start over, right? And I think that's the biggest thing is, okay, I need to figure out where I want to go and what I want to do next. And I knew I'd have to do web. So my husband is a programmer. And so I think that's really allowed me to have a partnership as well as a sounding board on, it looks great, but it will never work on mobile, right? Or what did you promise the client? Are you kidding me? That's going to take 30 hours. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Learning curve. But I paid my friends. I went online. I did a ton of just research learning because it's a different beast, and it's changing. It's like in dog years, everything just keeps changing. So I went into that, and then I realized, it's not that bad. Like, you can really still use your design, and actually you can use this for your client's brand. And going where I introduced myself into the field as to where I am now, I'm actually really lucky that I learned print and web, intermixing the two different ideas, because as I was teaching at CIA, I recognized that your brain has to kind of transition on how you're going to have fluidity in a design and movement and technology. And you had people that were either technical or people that were design. And so being able to cross all the bridges and being able to kind of explore that medium was pretty interesting. And then just using the application of creativeness, but still technology. And now I find myself at first wondering if web was where I wanted to be. And now I love putting it together. I love the immediacy. I still love print. I still love brand. I still love logo writing. But it's really interesting on how fast and, I want to try this. And so when Spike says, where do you see yourself? I'm like, I really think this door is opening. You asked me 3 months ago, and it was different from what's now because I'm learning new things. It's always just learning and growing. And so that's how I've transitioned, is that I continue to transition. I'm looking ahead at the market, 3D virtual reality. And now I feel like this technology that we're using now and in the grocery stores, it was in the forefront. But now I feel like a lot of people are going to recognize that we're going to have to adapt different technology, meaning, okay, there's different databases, there's online. Now there's going to be like my integration with credit card to online to, shipping that's not going to be touched by anyone, and having clients trying to, move their merchandise and their services to more online. So it's been a fast, okay, it's go time. Like, I got to make money. So watching these last 4 weeks has been really interesting, and really, in a way, watching the curve of technology start here. And then when things came at us, we were like here, and we're still, I see these companies just trying to turn and do different integrations. So it's been good.
All right. So that makes me think of something, because I remember back in the days when there were all the paste up and dedicated typesetters, and they were making the transition to, desktop publishing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was real primitive back then. And there were youngsters that were jumping on board, but there were seasoned professionals that were kind of like resisting and fighting it, kind of like maybe the web might be for some print designers now. But I would tell the seasoned professionals that they actually had an advantage, because they already knew the techniques. They just had to learn the tools, and they actually understood the process and the quality a lot better.
I would agree.
The same for web.
Yeah, I would agree. So when I think about this, I say, don't be disheartened. You as designers, and Mikey as a musician, I know I see these familiar faces. I see everybody dabbling in music, even though they don't have it in their background. It's that part of your brain where you have a gift or you have a vision, and you either get it and can organize it, or you can't apply it moving forward. And I think there's so many talented people in this chat group here that It might be a different application, but it's still the same ideas. It's still my spatial relationships. It might just be three-dimensional versus linear, it's all about design. And so moving forward, I also am working on a variant of what I want to do and do outreach is that I am a really good organizer. I have 3 kids, couple dogs and stuff, and I've worked with families and I've gone in and said, what your house is like, I can't take it. Like what's going on that you have to have processes, right? As designers, we do. So I help them kind of set up systems. And so I'm like, this is cool. It's like 3-dimensional. I don't do any interior design. It's all about, I figured it out in numerics. Like, okay, everybody assesses a problem. How do I solve it? What are the best tools and what's the best result? And it's like across the board. So it's been really fun to just see, as a designer, when you just kind of sit back and say, I see things in a different way, and that's never going to change. And so you're right, Spike. If you have that skill set, the vocabulary, yes, you have to learn in that medium, like Karen, but you still have that core. And as a teacher, when I was at CIA, I could tell the students that had that and they have a vision and they can move forward. And then people that may struggle, that are very good technically, but why isn't this working? Like, what's wrong? And it's an innate sense that you can't teach. So it's really been an interesting field.
Okay, let me ask Sue Nelson. You want to comment and you want to say something about for yourself, Sue?
Well, everything that both Karen and Lisa are saying certainly resonates with me. I think what I'm so impressed with is that they seem to have an ability that their timing is so good that a change was coming. They had a desire, or they did a little grieving and then had a desire, and that was matched somewhere in the marketplace. They were able to bridge to people somewhere out in the community who also wanted what their heart wanted to do.
When you say that your heart bridge, that's one of the reasons why I want to go into people's homes, because as a designer, I find myself less and less meeting with my clients. 2 years ago, I would go into meeting rooms and sit with people and literally with the presidents of companies for 3-4 hours. No one can afford that kind of time with me anymore. I respect that, and it's all digital. And I really kind of miss that engagement and that emotion that you're not going to get when you have like even FaceTime online. And so I think that's where that is a part, and it'll kind of satisfy that integration, that psychology, that in solving things. But then I come back to, I'm okay. I'm going to get into my work for 5 to 10 hours because I've already had that stimulus. So it's kind of interesting in how my brain is working as well.
One thing that's been interesting for me is the change between having a client where I was working with their concept and trying to bring their concept to light and express what they were trying to accomplish, and switching it to being what I'm trying to say. I mean, so it was kind of like, well, I spent 35, 40 years of my life figuring out what other people, helping them express themselves. And it was like, well, what's inside of me? What do I have to express? So that's been really an interesting challenge that's different for me. And one thing that's helped in where I have my studio, which is in the Screw Factory in Lakewood, we have open studios occasionally. And so I get the chance for hundreds of people come through, and I can actually talk to people about my art. And it's amazing to me how many people, I think, really want to be artists themselves, even if they're not. There's something inside of human beings that want that kind of expression. So it's been interesting to tap into some of those kinds of thought processes.
Everybody wants to be an artist. You all are special. So Sue, can you tell people about the kinds of career changes? Like, since we kind of talked about, I guess I want to get into some of that as well. Can you comment about that?
Sure. And I want to follow up with one quick thing that Karen just said, which is that there's been some research that goes back to, like the cave paintings at Lascaux and stuff, that art actually predates language. So I think that, yes, there probably is something very primal in us that needs to be expressed expressively. So I love that. And I also am noticing tonight how many times the word story has come up already. And one of the things that we look at in job search advising and any kind of coaching that we do, particularly with midlife, is midlife people are really paying attention to the story of their lives. And they're very interested in their forebears and in who comes after them. And they just have this sense of story. So when they're looking, even if they're scoping down to just their career path, they want it to hold together. They want there to be a through line. They want it to make sense. And indeed, this time of life is about making sense of our lives. Sometimes we do a little readjustment and reassessing. Other times it's pretty good. I want to add on a little, or maybe it's just amends making to something, and otherwise it can go forward. So this time of life is very rich with story. To make a transition, Bill Bridges, who wrote this wonderful book back in the 80s called Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes, it says that you have to have three things to have a new beginning. You have to have an ending, and then a neutral zone, and a new beginning. And the neutral zone, for often people, feels like wandering in the desert. And because there doesn't seem to be pattern to it, there's a lot of trial and error a lot of times. And so what my work has more recently been, and Lisa and Karen are beautiful examples of this, and I'm so grateful for that, because of course it's one of the risks in coming tonight is I didn't know if my theory would pan out. But that neutral zone, I have now concluded, has 4 stages to it as well. And the first one is grief, feeling the loss. So Karen, you had said, you weren't planning on retiring quite that early, but that's what happened. So without knowing your story, I know there was some loss. There was loss of whatever your plan was, if nothing else. And then the second stage is processing, which is the thinking part of what happened. And a lot of times when folks are going to make a transition because they were made to leave their job, that feeling and processing part is often given short shrift. Our society doesn't really pay a lot of attention to it, but it sounds to me like you ladies did. And the other thing is it can start a little earlier. Sometimes people are just like, there's no ending date yet. Their last date of employment isn't named yet, but they're feeling done. They're feeling restless. They're starting their search and their processing and trying to figure out, so that happens, it goes in. The third phase, also you talked about beautifully, is the learning. All the, what technology is out there? What do I need to learn? Karen, what is going on with the focal point in these paintings? It's learning, right? Until it pops up. And then the fourth stages are reorienting. And there's predictably a reintegrating into the new work once you start to reorient. That comes out of learning, which comes after the processing. And just like you both described, you bring your strengths through with you, even if you make some radical change. Even if somebody, said, I don't want to be an artist anymore, I want to be an accountant. You could still, I bet, when you really sat with the person and heard their story, there would be a through line with it. So that's my thoughts at the moment. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, it's funny when I talk to people, like I'm usually trying to persuade them to do a showcase for the May program to tell their story, and they tell me they don't have anything to say, they don't have an interesting story, and I just find that totally unbelievable. And usually once they get started, it's easy to talk about yourself. So it kind of just comes naturally at that point. So that's how at least I think of the story part of it.
Susan, what you're saying makes a great deal of sense to me. That in between part that you're describing can feel like you're wandering in the desert, and it can be a time of self-doubt. It can be kind of a painful period. And one thing that helped me, I guess, was reading a little bit about the Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. But it's like, I feel like you have to write your own story, that you're in control of your own story. And if you want to try to change the arc of your life, to the extent that you can, I say go for it. And so I guess I've always wanted to say, okay, I don't like how this story's going. I'll do what I can to adjust it the best I can, I guess.
There's something that comes to mind for me now that I guess maybe for all the panel, there's two youngsters here. Most of the CDPUG is usually, like, I guess more. I use the word seasoning to be polite. And I think CDPUG's over 40 years old now. So I think that, like, we're really slow learners because we've been wandering around the desert for 40 years and more. But I'd like to give I think the youngsters that are here are really brilliant because they're willing, I'm sure they have their own talents and things that they do from being young, but the fact that they're able to listen to ideas from, like, people with experience, I think is good too. So what advice can you give them?
I would say just be fearless because you don't have a lot established. Like, I kind of live by that. If you want it, you have to go for it. You have to really define your goals and don't let anything stop you. As you get older and families get in the way, it could become an excuse. And so I feel like you just have to kind of every once in a while, as you're going down your life path, kind of sit back and say, is this the direction? Kind of like what Susan mentioned, a reevaluation. And I don't think a lot of people really spend time reevaluating and saying, I like to do this, but really, is this going to, bring me joy or income in the next year? Do I need to transition? So I think just really keeping an eye aside from your phones and being head down, you need to look out and just take some time and literally clear your head. And Susan, that key point of saying, hey, you have that feeling in your gut. You totally do. Even before you're allowing your brain to process or analyze it, you just have that feeling. And one of the things in society for the younger kids too is in your 20s, maybe 30s, you think, oh, I am defined as being a designer. That's my job. That's my title. And when I left a really big corporation, I was like, wow, I'm like out by myself because I had the luxury of having a better budget, everything paid for. I didn't have a lot of overtime. Like, I would just go in, do my job, and it was safe. My computer broke. I would just, I snapped, right? But now I'm like, oh no, Andy, I broke my printer, right? And so you learn how to be more self-reliant, more self-sufficient. And it was good. At first, I was like, wow. And I recognized it early. So I wasn't afraid because I had a good network and I loved what I did. And I felt like I could, because of my relationships, be strong in what I did. So secondarily, it's not all about the job. As you get older, you're going to realize that it's all about relationships. At the end of the day, who can I count on? I want to run an idea off of my writer, but she's my friend. It is about just creating these relationships that, I guess, as I get older, I don't regret it, but I kind of wish I held on to some of the people that I held on to. And like recircle around, and I'm finding people are recircling around to me. And I don't know. You've got to kind of keep your eyes open.
You have anything to add to that, Karen?
I think the main message I would give would be that you are a creative person and you can create the life that you want to the best of your abilities. I mean, there's always something that's going to get in the way. I think you have to keep in mind that the future is never going to be the same as what you imagine it's going to be. It's going to be different. And I think you have to be open to the fact that it's going to be different, and that as a creative person, you can adjust and adapt and try to thrive in what may be a totally different direction than what you thought it was going to be. When I first started out, it was before computers, we ordered type to be set, we got it, we pasted it up. It was a totally different environment. And then within a few years after I got out of art school, everything changed. We shifted to computers. So I couldn't even have imagined that when I was in school. And actually, I think it's exciting that things change. So I guess just be open to that.
I would agree. Yeah, just be really open. I mean, don't be flippant about it, of course, but just know that things are changing and you'll always try to find your niche, or there might be things that you don't want to do. And as Susan mentioned, maybe some of my friends are like, yeah, I'm getting out of this game. I don't want to go the web direction. They were illustrators. They're like, I don't like my clients. Things are changing. And it's okay to make a change, because as you get older too, you recognize that really you're only accountable to yourself and your family, and a lot of the other external opinions don't really matter. You just really have to kind of look back and say, you know what, I did some really cool stuff and I'm really proud of myself. And at the end of the day, like, just know that that's a good representation of who you want to be.
In some ways, maybe it's easier to roll with things when you're younger because you don't have as many expectations as to what the future will be. I don't know. It might be actually easier.
I do wish I could do all-nighters like I used to all the time. Because it was a normal thing. Just like I would stay at the office until the sun came up, and then I would stay longer.
I know. I remember, like, you could just go to the office and then leave and then come back at 8 and be fresh. And now you're like just rolling out. It's horrible. Like, I don't know if it's just your brain is so full, or there's just things are going so fast. I find that a lot of people they get tired faster, or maybe it's just our age. I don't know.
I'd like to ask a question about training, because I think you do have to. You have some. Go ahead, Sue. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I just want to speak to the idea of young people, and I have gotten more convinced of the importance of stage of life, and that young folks' stage of life is to be available for opportunity. So the metaphor I use for the early 20-somethings is the marriage metaphor. Not that everybody has to get married, but that idea of leaving home with the intention of never returning back as a child, but leaving and going out into the world and growing and being available. There may be a travel component. There's usually union with other people and your passion and your love with it. And that stage of life is so crucial to the world. And I mean that very literally, to the evolution of the world. There's, I could go on. There's like 4 more workshops, but I think that it is incumbent upon us older people to be allies of the younger people. That in the 70s, there were students desperately trying to find environmental studies. They knew they had a yearning, and there were some universities who even put them together, but there were no jobs. And more recently, it's been anthropology. There have been young people wanting to go into anthropology. And when I ask them, what do you want to do with it? They can't tell me, but they know they have to do it. I think that has always been true of the creatives, that they have known even before they had words what it was that needed to come out. Artists have always shown us what was coming. And so I think that it's important for us to not be in the position of saying, but there's no job, that we have to be allies and try to help them find ways that they can express the passion of their heart.
Oh, that's so true. And if I can just go on a tangent, my daughter's finishing up her first year at OSU. And when she left, I told her, I said, this is your time. Like, you explore. She's doing pre-med, but I said, you don't have to be scientific and analytical. She has such a really good other side of her brain that it's amazing. And she's wondering if she's going to change to maybe be a psychologist, because you're right. But speaking to that, I think that you open the door and say, this is your time. Like, you can do anything. You got to listen to your heart. You've got to look at research. But take as many opportunities. And even as us as designers and business people, don't negate meeting new people or trying a new thing. Even we were doing something the other day, and it was, just how do you make something? And I was feeding the kids, and then they just went and they took it a different way. And I was like, see, guys, this is what's really cool, is that if you make something, and even as a teacher, I'll teach something, but then they take it and they twist it in such a different way. It's humbling, because you're like, I didn't even, and then I'm like, wait, I didn't even see that, and it's like, wow, like, I'm missing this, but I'm not. But it's like, it's so neat to see different people in their brain, and you learn every day from those experiences. So yeah, I'm really thankful that I was in the time where we had a slow time, like with our design and our typography, Karen, being able to sit and then you wait for the printer for an hour and a half, like that's unheard of now. But those were like really times that you could just really sit there and think about what you're doing. And now it's like, I need it. And you've got 20 different messages and noise. And so what I'm thinking here is like, there's so much noise. I'm going to compartmentalize it, and then I'm going to focus on the exact thing that I want to say, and that's going to be the core that's going to boom back, expand things out. So, just really being careful and cognizant, and even with internal or international travel that my daughter's been exposed to, not going, but having students come in, that was unheard of when we went to school. They're just so much more open. Mm-hmm. Ideas and culture. Yeah.
So Sue, can you comment about aptitude tests? Because I know you and I talked about that, and I know you need to follow your heart and your passion, but you also want to you might want to have some kind of metrics to kind of know what you're really good at the same time. Like, so what's out there for people, I guess at any age, that are thinking of changing, but not sure what they want to change to, whether it's a different form of art or something different. Completely.
I think aptitude tests can be really helpful. Oftentimes people can do so many things that to say yes to this handful of things means they have to say no to like everything else. And it's a painful choice. I call it the affliction of the bright. So when somebody really has so many ways they could go, and also so many pressures, they still have to make some money. They still have to support their family. They still have to plan for their retirement. They still have to get home at the end of the day because they've got whatever the pressures are. And so in that situation, I think aptitude tests are really important. There are tests online for people, those who are closer to their school age. Their career services centers and their student services have a lot of assessment tools. And the libraries, when they get back online, have a lot of tools as well. There's a couple different kinds of assessments. Some are more personality and strengths, like personal traits kind. And then there's others that measure more, do you have mechanical skill? Do you have spatial orientations, like skills, kind of skills. So I think a combination of those can really help a person be able to say yes when they want to say yes to what makes sense, and to be able to say, oh, even though I think this music career is really cool and I would love to do it, I'm tone deaf. And so I need to do something maybe around music production, but I'm not going to be a paid musician and make my living off of it. Does that make sense? Like, you could still be around music, you can still enjoy it, But to say I'm going to put a stake in the ground and make my living as a musician when you're tone deaf is something you couldn't do. So you have to have temperament. You have to have the stick-to-itiveness of whatever the work is. You have to be able to physically do whatever it is. I am never going to be a basketball player. I'm 5'2". Not going to happen, right? So some people can't sit long. Some people can only sit long. I mean, there's some people have to be with other people. Some people need quantities of time on their own. So all of those things make up a person and can help them choose which things to enjoy, which things to dabble in, and which things to make a living on.
Does that apply for people retiring too, or is at that point they kind of know what they want, or how does that?
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Many times they know already. Many times I remember working with a woman who had been a bookkeeper a whole career, and she was finally laid off. And I did this assessment with her, and I said, "Oh, you're a bookkeeper?" And she said, "No, I'm not. I'm a dancer." And I'm like, "No, it says right here, you're a bookkeeper." And it turned out that she was a single mom early on in a time when women didn't have a lot of options. And she was able to get a bookkeeping job that made enough that she could support herself and her children on. But she really was a dancer.
Oh. All right, Lisa, you have something to say to that?
No, I would be here forever. So what's your next comment?
I guess I wanted to talk about like what path you had to do to get where you are for all of you. I know obviously training is important for anything. And so I know each of you had things that you did. I guess maybe Sue did too, but why don't you start with that, Karen, and at least tell what you had to do from get point A to point B, or maybe A, B to C to D, or however your path was.
A to Z to W to T to bouncing around trying to figure things out. Well, I realized that from my graphic design work, I had a good sense of color and how to arrange a painting, but I sure could not master the medium. I mean, I was used to working on a computer all day, and all of a sudden, here I am trying to paint with physical materials and trying to figure out how to make that work. So I realized I needed to basically go back to school in some sense. So I took a lot of classes, both in person and online. And in my sheet that I handed out, or that I gave to Henry, I have some online classes, resources that I found very helpful.
Those will be in the chat in a minute if they're not already there.
Okay. I realized that I just needed to be able to put up with producing crummy art, which I was not used to. I was used to having more predictable results, and it was very frustrating to feel like I was going back to not grade school again, but I mean, I was going back to a point of less mastery. I do have something I could share. Let me see. Can you see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay. This was very helpful to me. This is called it's a theory called the 4 stages of competence. As you can see, most of us start in the upper left with unconscious incompetence. You're unaware of the skill and your lack of proficiency. So I think at first I thought, hey, this is great. I can just do paintings. I'm an artist, and I didn't know that maybe it wasn't as successful. Then you go to conscious incompetence, where as an artist, you sometimes feel like you're just a total wreck. I mean, it's like you realize that you need the skill and you can't do it. And it's just like really distressing. You feel like you should just chuck it all in and give up. I'm not quite at the point of conscious competence, but it's taken a lot of hours of painting and training to try to get to that point. My goal would be to get to the point of unconscious competence, which is where it's an automatic skill. It's like how I used to be able to work with InDesign and just kind of, you're not even thinking about how the program works. Your fingers are just flying and you're just doing your layout. I'd like to be able to get to that point with my painting. So the way I did it was to slog in the hours. I joined, there was like several series of 30-day challenges that I joined where you had to paint something every day for 30 days and post it online, which gave me like a responsibility. I had to show up. I had to do it. And even if it was crummy, I couldn't hide it. I just had to keep going. And at the end of the 30 days, and I did several of these challenges, it was really very helpful to do that. And the other thing I did was I started working with an online mentor. She taught some classes that I took when she was here in town. She lives on the West Coast, and I have her listing is in there too. It's been very helpful to talk to an artist who's further ahead along the curve of where you want to go than where you are. And it gives you moral support, gives you guidance, and maybe can give you good critiques, because it's hard to get a good, honest critique from friends and family who say, "Oh, you're wonderful, you're wonderful." And you're like, "No, I don't need that kind of help. I need something more structured and specific." So that's kind of a bunch of what I've been going through to try to get better.
Yeah, it sounds like I saw a concert that Rhiannon Giddens did, and she talked about having to learn how to learn the banjo. And I guess it's the same for musical instruments. She said you have to be willing to suck for a while.
Yeah.
You get to the point where you could play it well. And I'm sure the banjo is probably really hard to get good at.
Yeah.
It's all hard.
No, and this kind of goes back to learning new things. When I first started CrossFit, I was the only one gasping for air and get my time if I pass out, right? But then that's where I was at. And I'm like, I was going to the dumpster and everybody else got to go around the building. And I'm like, oh, it's so good. But it worked out. Now I get to go around the building too. So I think that no matter what you do have to start somewhere. As you get older, you don't think that you want to do that, but just have to be open and look at it from a childlike attitude and just say, I really want to try this. And speaking to Karen's comment about mentors, I just suddenly realized I have friends and mentors and people in my life that are supporting me, and I ask questions and we learn from each other. So I think that's a huge piece that I didn't acknowledge earlier that I would like to point out, and they help me. And when I'm not as motivated, I'll talk to them. I'm like, I'm just not designing today. They're like, let's go to Starbucks. Let's get some coffee and let's figure out what's like literally a writer's block. Cause I'm like, I'm just having a really hard time with something, or let's take a walk and, still staying within the field, right? Because you don't want to just go out and go shopping or something. Like, you really need to have your friends to help you analyze a problem,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be design or like a whole identity, or, what's the best medium? Do you think I should put this on social first? Do you think I should do a blog first? Like, what's the best thing for my client? And just having those conversations. So I guess I'm really lucky.
You have something to add to that, Sue?
Of course.
I knew that, but I'm sure it'll be useful.
So often, career development is talked about this person and what their purpose is and what they need to go forward, and everything is about the individual. And I'm here to tell you, I've had over 4,000 clients. Never was it ever true that somebody's career developed by themselves. Not even hermits, because they have to withdraw from society. So you can't be a hermit if there's nobody. And so again, Karen and Lisa, you've been beautiful examples of this. The image of the Israelites wandering for the desert in 40 years, which I've often used to express the experience of midlife job seekers in particular. It's the metaphor is about this like murkiness and just wandering and nothing. But in actuality, oh God, there's like a whole thing. I'm trying to shorten this. In actuality, they moved together. They never left each other. In fact, the couple people who left died. That whole community stayed together. It is a community journey. It is the community that leaves the land of slavery, goes through a bunch of interesting experiences, and ends up in the promised land. The community goes together. They had all of the resources they needed. They had livestock. They had gold. They had clothes. They had tools. They had tents. They had everything they needed to be able to have a society. They had, Moses knew how to write. I don't know where they used the stone tablets. Never mind. I was going to say, where did they get paper? But they had hides. It was the community that moved forward, and each talent that was needed to keep that community going for over 40 years was there in that community. So when Lisa says somebody knows what software to use, or Karen says my mentor told me how I could do this differently, all of the tools, all of the resources, all of the support, everything's in the community. And
all right, so I guess I want to try to at least get moving towards wrapping things up, just because it's later than I planned, though I feel like we're still interesting, but I have a very long attention span. So are there questions that I've missed from the audience, or do I need to? No. All right. Well, all right. I guess I get to drive then. So I'd like to have one last topic before we wrap up, and then I'd like to ask the panelists to stick around, and we can do breakout rooms, and you can ask questions to them. Like,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but maybe it would be helpful if you guys could just type in a quick message, and we could all answer together.
Okay. So I guess I want to talk. So let me do. While you're doing that, let me just ask a question why they're doing that. So, I've being self-employed. I'm used to wearing lots of hats, but not everybody's used to that. So I guess I wanted to talk about the wearing many hats idea. So I guess, Karen, can you start with that one?
Yeah, I guess I am wearing a lot of hats. Besides just being somebody that is painting pictures, I'm also a small business owner, although not financially very successful. I would not recommend being a fine art painter for financial success. I would recommend being a graphic designer and doing freelance for that. But still, it's sometimes I teach. I also have taught, and that's a different hat, which I really enjoy. Try to do bookkeeping, but that's really not my pay grade. Marketing, trying to figure out how to do social media, how to do marketing. Of course, that's related to advertising and graphic design, so it's not that crazy. I'm trying to learn how to make my own videos now, because that seems to be the way that social media and self-promotion is going these days. So now I'm going to be a videographer, and I'm going to have to try to figure out how to piece music together too, I guess. So I don't know. It's wild and woolly, I guess.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, Lisa?
Let's see. Well, Susan spoke about mindfulness. And so wearing many hats, you can lose yourself. So I would say try to set goals every day. I'm an avid reader, and I find myself reading about forensics and things, and like, how does that apply to my clients? But there's problem solving there. So I can convince myself, right? But I think just being mindfulness, wearing many hats, I think that's what makes the person successful, is a kind of personality that maybe you enjoy wearing a lot of different hats. I love that energy. I love every day not being the same. sometimes it's crazy, but you just embrace it and say, oh my gosh, this is hilarious. Like I was doing this presentation and like someone was behind me, like just trying to sneak by. And like, I don't know, I just find joy. I think my family and people that know me know what we went through. We won't bring it up here, but we just had a lot of difficulties, not within our family, but circumstances. And I feel like that's really provided me to just be fearless and say, you know what, I have nothing to lose. I'm so ready to go for it. I'm so ready to just do my calling, but I also am not going to be a crazy risk taker. Like I'll have steps. So I think speaking to the mindfulness, I was taking some notes. There's many hats, but you really have to be careful how many hats. I have an accountant and I'm like, oh, and he's like, Lisa, how many checks do you write a week or a month? I'm like, 3, I can't deal with this. He's like, you're an idiot. I'm like, I get stressed and it takes me all day. He's like, you got to stop. Let me take it. Right. And then there's things like, I can't sew. My kids, like, their Girl Scout uniform, it was a vest. I sewed it together. I started to cry. I'm like, it's not my gift. You know, my husband took it. So I'm realizing things that I'm really good at, I'm going for it. Things that I can't, I need to just delegate, right? So my hats are okay. I have different visions. There's so many things I want to do. I feel like I'm running out of time. So I have to just say, okay, as we get up here and there's more behind us, I have to really make a conscious effort to say, I need to get my rest. I need to really plan out like the next 5 years because you just go through life. Like Karen mentioned, she didn't expect to fall into this, but I think I need to just be really conscientious of my time so I can achieve my goals. But just every day, appreciate everything. And I really do. I love you guys, all of you. And I appreciate what I have so much. I have so much joy. Like I'm so thankful. Right. And so I think every day you guys you can walk, you can breathe. So many people can't. Like, I am so excited. I'll just go off on a tangent. We're doing outreach. Like, I'm just like on fire because I'm like, finally, like after all these years, I'm like, I have a gift. My husband's like, with this virus, I'm like, oh, you know what? I really like helping people. And I'm like, I suddenly realized I'm like bringing people food and like doing outreach. I'm like, I really like this. And like, you just realize like, oh, so all of a sudden, boom, the light bulb goes off. So every day is an opportunity. There's something coming at you that you won't really notice. But then when you start to put the pieces together, just, you know, if you need a journal or like write it down, I've seen so many people because they're mindful, just really, really pushing themselves and being awesome people and being better people. And so I'm just wishing for all of you, like tonight, be motivated. I know you're isolated. Be motivated, be strong. You got this. Like this is a time that you get to actually sit and think what's in your brain and be better. So that's all I have to say. Like, I'm excited for this future.
Okay. I was going to ask a question, but I think that was Sarah wanted to know about inspiration, but then I'd like to wrap up, I think.
Oh, on that gift, if I could.
Yes.
There's actual research that says there are 3 things needed, 3 talents. Speaking of aptitude tests, there are 3 talents that are needed to have a company, even a tiny little business. One is whatever the product or service is, somebody who can make that. The second one is to market and sell it. And the third one is to keep the books. And the research also shows that nobody ever has had all 3 of those talents. So if you don't have all 3 talents, it doesn't mean that you can't have a business, but you have to do what Karen and Lisa just suggested, is find somebody else who will sell for you or somebody else who will keep your books. And other people will say, you know, I can do my accounting and my art, but I can't do the marketing. So they might choose to go into a small agency where they help with some of the billing and do their art, but somebody else does the marketing, for instance. So once you know what 1 or 2 you have of those 3 things, you can choose the kind of organization that works best for you.
Okay. So let's wrap up with the question about inspiration, and then we can wrap up our evening. So if Sarah asked that, but there were other contributions too, is there anything that you would want to say about that?
What was the question? Oh, where do you get the most inspiration?
Yes.
I like to start my day with some time that I call appreciation, which is just kind of appreciating the world around me. And I think that leads me to different times in my life when I come across just an everyday scene or an everyday something about the way the light catches on something. And that is what inspires me to make a painting. So that's kind of a literal inspiration for doing my artwork. The inspiration to keep growing as a creative person, I don't know where that comes from. It seems to be in something I've always felt, so I don't know where that comes from.
I think it's a childlike curiosity that we're always playful and trying to explore, and realizing then that that has to kind of fit into some kind of I'll say a job or a project or something that can then be solicited or sold. But I do think artists see the world so differently. Sometimes I look at the world and I just like, is anybody seeing this? And like standing here like, oh my gosh, like, didn't you see that beautiful cloud with the undertones and the gray, and like nobody else is seeing it, right? So I'm like, we just see things differently, and that's how we express ourselves. And for inspiration, I think it's with the internet, sometimes when you're just kind of in a lull, just going on and looking at different work or something in a completely different vein, that again circles around in your brain. Like if you're reading, if you're a designer, if you're doing music, maybe you're listening to an aria or Gregorian chants, and like that is like putting on music and then using all of the senses is something that maybe just pulls it all together strangely.
My favorite learning style is listening. And I just have a God-given talent that I spot patterns. So in tonight's event, I think this idea of story and story trajectory has been really interesting, and I would say inspiring to me. I really want to go back and delve into that more. So that's how I get mine, is hearing and hearing things repeated. I'll start to pick up patterns.
Thank you very much for our panel for giving us their time and saying yes when I persuaded them. And thank you for all of you for attending. So thanks very much. I'll see you at the May Showcase.